Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. The argument you're about to see is full of logical fallacies. The names are the avatar names of the people that have created the various content that they're providing. Bum ba dum, bum ba dum ba dum, bum ba dum, dun 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 dun.
Now, it's important to note that the argument is not the Kalam cosmological argument. It's not about the beginning of the universe. Rather, the argument is that there needs to be a cause to sustain the universe in existence, even if the universe has always existed.
But how do we know that that's the case? How do we know that there must be something sustaining the universe? After all, there is the fact that we observe the universe is flying apart at accelerating rate, and the estimates talk about the heat death of the universe. That's not being sustained very well. It seems rather that it's going into disorder until it can't go into any more disorder. Entropy is happening. Well, if we still need a sustaining thing, what about gravity? It seems to work very well to sustain things. But of course, then you could ask, well, where does the force of gravity come from, or how does that work? And there might be an answer to that question. But it seems to me that this question itself might commit the fallacy of question begging. Or it might be an invalid question. It might not be a coherent question in the first place. We'll see what the rest of the argument has to say before we conclude, one way or the other, on what fallacy, if any, this question might be making.
Now first I'm going to define how I'm using the terms necessary and contingent. By necessary, I mean something that has to exist and has to exist without a cause. By contingent, I mean something that can only exist due to a cause or due to chance.
Credit where credit's due. It's great to have an argument actually provide definitions for the words that it's going to be using. However, how do we know that there is a necessary? How do we know that there is a contingent? These things in and of themselves might require another argument to show that they are, in fact, things at all.
By the principle of sufficient reason, I mean the claim that contingent things and events can't exist or occur without a cause. I'm going to call this the consistent causal framework view. Now, some have argued that the consistent causal framework could be broken. For example, philosopher David Hume argued that it seems at least logically possible that something could occur or exist without a cause. For example, we could imagine a brick just popping into existence without a cause, without a logical contradiction being involved.
The problem here, among others, is that the people making these arguments were not aware of quantum superposition, which we know about today. And I might get this pretty darn wrong, but if I understand even a little bit, it seems that quantum superposition throws a gigantic wrench into the mix. Here you have things that might be happening after the event didn't happen and before the event does happen, and sometimes it's here and sometimes it's there, and it's all a bunch of probabilities, and it's confusing as bleep. This is a potential counterexample of the normal causality that we're used to. The domino effect here works backwards, or works in an unexpected way that we just, can talk about in mathematics, but if we try to apply classical logic to it, it just doesn't work. We simply run out of variables to deal with. It's just not suited to this. A is not A, and A is sometimes A, and A is also sometimes B, but it's also sometimes not B and A at the same time, because that's what it does. That breaks everything that classical logic normally can do. So we might have to update logic to fit in the quantum world. We haven't done that to my knowledge yet. And so because of this counterexample, I'm not sure that cause and effect can be applied to the entire realm of existence. Yes, we can apply it to big things, certainly. But if you're talking about the maintaining cause of the universe and you're leaving out quantum physics, you're leaving out a lot. And that is a cause for concern. Until you address properly how quantum superposition doesn't matter in your argumentation, I think that this counterexample knocks your whole causality thing out the window. But hey, I'm no King Crocoduck, so I can't hope to explain any of this, really. Quack.
However, this raises the question as to why causal relations are so consistent for our reality. For if the consistent causal framework could be broken, then what ensures that causal relations can maintain at all? You can't argue that they're caused to be consistent, because that would beg the question, because causing them to be consistent would be a part of the question as to why causal relations are so consistent. It can't be part of the nature of things for them to be consistent, because that would beg the question as well, why are the natures so consistent? It can't plausibly be due to chance, because there'd be trillions of times for causal relations to fail, but they don't. So the most plausible answer is that there is a necessary, consistent causal framework, and that's why causal relations are so consistent.
The beginning question of the entire argumentation was, what sustains the universe? Here we're shown what it can't be. And I think that that means that the opening question is one that is a loaded question. So I wasn't sure what logical fallacy it might be. Now I'm pretty sure what it is. Here he outlines things that it can't be. It can't be this, it can't be that, it can't be this, so therefore it has to be this. But it could still be any of those things, and some of those things don't necessarily beg the question. In fact, being a nature to be consistent is certainly not begging the question. That's simply not the correct fallacy that you're looking for there. Because it might be the tautology of reality that cause and effect is the nature of reality. At least the nature of reality today. If we go to the distant past, during when the universe was super hot, who knows if cause and effect is still functional, at least how we understand it. And certainly when we go into the quantum world, well, who knows what the bleep's going on then. So we have two potential counterexamples for this. So simply dismissing it as begging the question doesn't really make your argument. It's interesting that apologists will often do this. It can't be chance, it can't be nature, therefore it has to be God, sort of rhetoric. But it can be nature. We might not understand all about nature right now, so we have a lot of question marks to fill in, but it certainly can be nature, and that's not begging the question. It might simply be a tautology. Now, if my worthy opponent here wants to produce some sort of truth table or an additional argument to show that it cannot be this thing, great. Also, it would be great to have some science that shows that all of this or any of this is true. But we don't have any of that, do we? What we have here is just philosophy. It's thinking about things, and that's nice. But what are you basing any of it on? The classical logic as we understand it has not updated itself for quantum mechanics. So that's a potential problem. Another potential problem is that classical logic has not updated itself to be able to speak about the sort of universe that would have been when the universe was super, super hot, near the T1 state. That sort of reality is different than the reality that we have today. So it might be that logic gives way to science in these particular instances. or that we need to update logic to make these things into formulas that then can be analyzed for logical fallacies. But neither of these things has been done. So when exploring the cosmos and trying to get at the question of, well, why is it still here? Or what's sustaining it? Or how does any of this work? I don't think that classical logic is up to the task of answering that question. You're going to have to turn to science, something that hasn't been done here. We haven't been provided with empirical evidence or any sort of tests, no citation of any scientific papers that would support any of this as ideas. So that's already a problem. And then, of course, we don't have a logical argument, and that's a problem. Now, I could continue with this particular argumentation, but it doesn't get any better, it just gets worse. So I think I'm done for now, and I've made the points that I wish to make. We don't have empirical evidence, we don't have a repeatable test, we don't have a valid and sound argument, and because of that, we must be skeptical of the conclusions.